Someone I want to see.
My friend Sherlock Holmes.
221B Baker Street.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of The Return of Sherlock Holmes, Series 1, Episode 7, The Six Napoleons. Our prologue sees a young woman washing herself in the window, as the focus moves quickly away from her and right into an argument. It's a strange and somewhat salacious opening shot that I feel doesn't really work. If the series had established a tradition of doing this kind of establishing shot, then I could see it working, but it just feels incongruous to go from this to a raging argument.
Tutto il mio cuore! Sputi veleno, la tua bocca è piena di fango!
The whole thing is in Italian, so all we know is that it's heated and becomes violent, as Pietro, played by Vincenzo Nicolai, strikes Lucrezia, played by a pre-Star Trek Marina Sirtis, and tries to strangle her before being interrupted by the old man, Pietro's father. One word is clear though: vendetta. He is out for revenge. It's a powerful and emotional scene to kick off the episode, and would have been a strong prologue on its own, but the scene continues as we follow Pietro seeking his revenge. He finds his target, Beppo, but Beppo is prepared, and in an intense knife fight, Beppo is victorious, stabbing Pietro, just as the police arrive, causing Beppo to flee. He makes his way into a plaster factory and to a rack of Napoleon figurines, hurling them at the police and destroying a rack. He is eventually caught, seemingly driven insane. Pietro has survived and is dispatched by his father to find Beppo, taking a knife and a photograph of Beppo with him, half of Beppo and Lucrezia's courting photo. We then see the six Napoleons of the title being packed up and shipped off to Morse Hudson's shop. This is certainly an action-packed opening, but my one complaint is that, due to it being almost entirely in Italian, it's difficult to work out what the relationships between all the characters are. They do their best by giving visual clues, but it doesn't quite work. It would be natural to assume that Lucrezia and Pietro are husband and wife, and she was having an affair with Beppo. This could even help with obfuscating what is really going on with the mystery element. But they do try to show us the photograph of Beppo and Lucrezia together, indicating we are supposed to know that they are a couple, and yet we don't see it clearly enough to be able to recognize a smart, well-dressed Beppo, having only just met him while he's more maniacal. This is a minor complaint though, as it doesn't really affect the enjoyment of the show. It just clarifies a few minor character elements. We then see Holmes and Watson in Baker Street enjoying some rare leisure time with Inspector Lestrade, who has a problem but is trying to be nonchalant about it.
Anything remarkable on hand, Lestrade?
Nothing in particular.
An impossible task in the company of Sherlock Holmes.
Then tell us about it.
This lackadaisical scene is so different from the prologue, it's almost distracting, as Lestrade then explains his problem to Holmes and Watson. Days earlier, Morse Hudson's shop was broken into, and one of the six Napoleon statues he received was smashed. Then a doctor's house suffered the same fate, and the doctor's surgery, where he also had a Napoleon statue purchased from Morse Hudson at each location. Lestrade thinks it's a madman with a grudge against Napoleon, and it's worth reiterating, as I mentioned in my review of The Final Problem, that Napoleon had become something of a hero in the late Victorian era, seen as a great general and something of a court celeb, so it's not as if there was a common sense of ill will against him at this time. Watson uses his medical knowledge to explain the burgeoning science of idée fixe, an obsession that dominates someone's personality, possibly driving them to a pathological hatred of Napoleon. Sherlock quickly dismisses this and explains there is a more calculated mind on display, as whoever it was acted in a way to break the statues without raising alarm. It's enough to pique Holmes' interest, although not enough to investigate, and he merely asks Lestrade to keep him informed. The next day, Lestrade calls for Holmes, as there has indeed been a development. The latest smashed statue comes with a body. The owner of the statue, a Mr. Horace Harker, played beautifully by Eric Sykes, is a journalist, furious he's unable to report on this story immediately because he is a part of it. He tells Holmes that he fell asleep while working the night before and was roused by a scream. He investigated and discovered his Napoleon bust had gone, and on his front step lay the body of Pietro. The remains of Mr. Harker's bust has been found in a front garden several streets away. There's a lovely moment where Lestrade is questioning why the bust fiend picked that house, and Watson explains because it was empty. And when Lestrade asks why he didn't pick an empty house closer to Mr. Harker's, Watson is given a little hint by Sherlock.
But there's another empty house further up the street he must have passed. Why not destroy it there?
The lamp!
It demonstrates Watson's ongoing character development and how his relationship with Holmes is one of close friendship, particularly when it comes to getting one up on Scotland Yard. At the mortuary, they examine Pietro's personal effects, and Holmes takes particular note of the photo. Holmes suggests he and Lestrade follow their own paths from here on out, asking him to meet at Baker Street that evening, and keeping the photo, in typical cheeky fashion.
And I would like to keep this photograph found in the dead man's pocket.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, that might be a vital clue.
I trust it is, otherwise it's of no interest to me.
Holmes's next stop is the shop of Morse Hudson, who is able to identify Beppo from the photo. He reveals there were 6 statues in total, and eventually provides the address of the 2 so far undamaged. They then go to see the plaster factory, where the owner explains that there was nothing unusual about the statues, and also reveals the incident with Beppo a year before. We then cut to Baker Street, where Lestrade impatiently waits for Holmes, sneaking a peek at one of his files, which delights Holmes and Watson as they catch a glimpse of Lestrade taking a peek. Lestrade is very pleased with his day's work, having discovered Pietro was mafiosa, and suspecting this was an assassination gone wrong. He is as pleased with his own work as he is dismissive of Holmes's, but Holmes tells him where he can find Beppo. That evening the 3 men lay in wait in a summer house until Holmes spots Beppo breaking in to the house they're watching. He's apprehended as he destroys the 5th statue, and Lestrade thinks that's the end of it, but Holmes asks him to meet again at Baker Street the next day. Holmes has invited the final bust owner to Baker Street. He ensures that the man is satisfied with his enormous payment of £10 for the bust. Holmes then takes the bust and smashes it, discovering inside the black pearl of the Borgias, having been missing since the year before. The maid of the owner of the pearl was Lucrezia, but rather than steal the pearl herself, Beppo got there first and fled, pursued by Pietro. He hid the pearl in one of the not yet set Napoleon figures before being caught. Lestrade applauds Holmes's deductions and pays him an enormous compliment, which seems to genuinely touch Holmes.
We're not jealous of you, at Scotland Yard. Oh, so we're proud of you.
Thank you.
The episode ends on a bitter note as Lucrezia, now clad in black, and her father visit the jail where Beppo has just been hanged, proving the idiom that if you seek revenge, first dig 2 graves. This is an incredibly well-crafted adaptation that not only tells a brilliant mystery story where murder is a feature, although not the central premise, but also is incredibly funny at times. It should come as no surprise that the writer, John Cain, is predominantly a writer and actor from the world of sitcom, as the script is genuinely funny, but in a way that is never farcical or out of place. That's the real skill of this script. The way Holmes, Watson and Lestrade interact is like a finely honed sitcom cast, and all three play the comedy pitch perfect. It's not obvious to see when you first watch the episode, and only comes through with repeat viewings, which I think is exactly how it should be, so not to overshadow the main story. But one example of this is where Holmes and Watson visit Mr. Hudson, and he's convinced it's red anarchists, only for this to be called back when Watson mentions it to Lestrade.
Red anarchists?
Oh, you've been talking to Morse Hudson, haven't you?
Do go on, Lestrade.
All the comedy comes from character, and fits so nicely because of this, whether it be Watson and Lestrade complaining about not getting enough sleep thanks to Holmes, or the scene of Holmes calling Watson to see Lestrade spying on one of Holmes's files. There aren't any obvious jokes, just character moments. This lightness also helps elevate the more touching moments, such as Lestrade thanking Holmes for all the work he does. It all adds up to a fantastically written and performed episode that is a very easy 5 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.